Number 5. No More Speedos. There's not many sports that have a bigger disparity in male to female fans than MMA.
We're the fucking females.
That's basically why we have ring girls and not Magic Mike types parading around the cage. Unless, of course, you're at an Invicta championship. But at UFC 133, Dennis Hallman didn't only fight inside the octagon, he also ended up showing more skin than your favorite ring girl in his TKO loss to Brian Ebersol, who already made things weird by having an arrow shaved right into his chest. Hallman wore an extremely small pair of blue trunks, claiming to have lost a bet with his teammates. Regardless, Dana White was outraged in the aftermath, saying that he was horrified at what he saw.
I'd call it disgusting. That was disgusting. It will never happen again, I can guarantee you that.
Thank you, Dana. For his next fight, Hallman would go on to pick up a submission win, but his contract was never renewed by the UFC. And although Dana claims this wasn't due to the clothing fiasco, not that many people are released on winning streaks. To this day, if you type in Dennis Hallman on Google, Speedo and shorts are usually the first suggestions that show up with your results. Number 4. Throwing an opponent over the cage. Despite the fact that there weren't many rules in the Tank Abbott era, you already know he's the type of guy who wouldn't follow the rules, even in modern MMA, if he felt he could get away with it. His intentions during his fight with Cal Worsham at UFC in 1996 led to an instant rule being created, one many fans may not have even thought about. Immediately as the fight started, Abbott, who had a walkout stat that he benched over 600 pounds, rushed forward in his typical brawling manner, but then surprisingly picked up the 230-pound Cal Worsham and literally tried throwing his opponent over the octagon. The worrying thing was, Tank Abbott actually came pretty close, with Worsham explaining that only his heel and the padding saved him from the embarrassment. In the end, Tank comfortably got the victory, but obviously the potential for a fighter to fall 6 feet head first onto a metal platform needed to be removed. Big John McCarthy soon after made the ruling within the UFC to disqualify anyone who tried to throw their opponent over the side of the cage, which also led to the realization that fence grabbing should probably also be banned. Number 3. Short grabbing. In MMA today, there's minimal excess clothing, and for good reason. Fighter shorts don't get in the way by constantly getting disheveled or untucked, like they did with the old GIs, and still do in full gear BJJ competitions today. But in the case of Pat Miletich versus Mikey Burnett for the inaugural welterweight title back in 1998, both men's shorts somehow became a pivotal aspect of the fight. Throughout the entire contest, both Miletich and Burnett had a solid grasp of each other's shorts, which resulted in one very dull affair, as neither fighter could break away and begin striking very often. Not only did it make for an obviously uneventful inaugural title fight, but the crowd found the whole ordeal pretty comical. John McCarthy had the unenviable task of having to fix Burnett's shorts, and got dangerously close to his junk in the process, while fans had a great view of Miletich's right butt cheek. What the fuck, man? So short grabbing became instantly banned, and fighters were legally unable to use them for leverage again. Pat's shorts were coincidentally the first UFC shorts with the infamous tap out logo on them, and were sold on eBay for over $15,000 in 2015. I'm sure they smell really great. Number 2. Groin Shots. Inspired by the UFC, the International Vale Tudo Championship, or IVC for short, held their first event in 1997. It was a one-night tournament in which former UFC fighter Gary Big Daddy Goodridge fought lucha libre expert Pedro Octavio. In the finals, eye-poking and biting were illegal, but groin shots were given the green light by the Brazilian organization, to which Goodridge obliged, not only striking right at his opponent's prized possession, but he even went further than just kneeing Octavio's balls, digging his feet and toes literally into Pedro's trunks to try to escape being on the bottom. When the two were standing, Goodridge got even more uncomfortably intimate with his opponent, getting a handful of his junk that forced Pedro to fall to the ground in discomfort. And yeah, all this led to Goodridge securing the stoppage victory. The IVC thankfully would create a specific rule banning a fighter from reaching into their opponent's trunks for the following event. The most infamous and justified ball smashing occurred at UFC 4 between convicted gang rapist and murderer Joe Sun and Keith Hackney. But this alone wasn't enough to force an immediate rule change, as it took place a whole 3 years before the promotion would ban it in 1997. Coincidentally, just a few months after the IVC banned banned it, but for totally different reasons, with mounting political pressure being the biggest reason of all. Number 1, lay and pray. After their first fight at UFC 1, both Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock won various tournaments and titles before their rematch. The UFC's first poster boy, Gracie, won the UFC 2 and 4 tournaments, while Shamrock went and conquered Pancrazy, picking up the inaugural title in Japan. So obviously there was a significant amount of hype when the two rematched at UFC 5, with fans hoping to see how Ken could tackle Gracie's submission game the second time around. But instead of the interesting grappling affair everyone had hoped for, we witnessed a whole load of inactivity. Shamrock lay in Gracie's guard, just avoiding submissions mostly, and barely took the risk to land much ground and pound of his own. With there being no ruling to stand up the fighters for lack of action back then, Shamrock essentially just laid there defensively, afraid to risk anything on top of Royce Gracie for 36 whole minutes. The fight was eventually declared a draw, marking the longest bout in UFC history and the first draw in the promotion. In order to combat this, referees were immediately given the ability to stand up fighters for inactivity at the following event, which was definitely a great addition to the rule set. Unfortunately, this also means we've seen many questionable stand-ups since then, but at least it prevents something like this from happening. On top of this, overtime limits were formally adopted. Thanks for watching my list. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe and like. I upload at least one video per week about MMA. It really helps us out when you do so. If I missed anything in this video, let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video.